Okay, well, as we move along in our class this week, I thought it would be good to talk to an expert in the area of working with people that have had lots of experiences with trauma. And it's a pleasure for me to introduce one of my colleagues and personal friends, Victoria Gutbrod. Victoria is a licensed professional clinical counselor with supervisory status. She's also had a number of areas of specialized training in dealing with trauma and EMDR, of which we're going to talk a little bit about this morning or this afternoon, whenever we're watching this CD. And I've just asked her to come and share just as friends, and we're just going to have a basic conversation, and I hope that you really enjoy this and get a lot out of this section of the class. Victoria, tell a little bit about your background and what you do with trauma and what your areas of professional.
First of all, you're so sweet, Dr. Lichi, that you would even consider me that expertise in trauma. Really, actually, what I consider myself is passionate about it. I feel as though it's something that God has really opened a door for me, giving me a lot of desire to understand trauma. Some of it comes from my history of just with my parents and with my husband, but it's something that I wanted to sit in front of the best of the best. So about 10 years ago, I began a seminar with one of the leading traumatologists in our country, Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, and he was the one who opened up this understanding for me. At that time, I was working with adolescents in a residential facility, and everything he was talking about, I kept saying, wow, that's so true, that's so true.
So a lot of the adolescents had experienced trauma?
Yeah, I was working in residential care with children who were wards of the state, and so they were disrupting their homes, whether it was adoptive, whether it was foster care, whether it was even their home environment, and so they became part of this residential treatment. And I worked in a locked unit with girls, and 90% of them had some form of trauma. And back then, you know, we used to think of trauma as what they now call big T traumas. Some form
So there's big T traumas, and that means there's little T traumas?
Little T traumas.
Okay.
And little T traumas, people are just beginning to understand that it has just as much of an impact on the nervous system and the body system as the large T traumas. And so that's why so many individuals with PTSD don't have those large traumas. And you also used to find too, and I still come across this, individuals who would see therapists who would see individuals who would react in a certain way and assume it had to be some form of sexual abuse. And that's why a lot of those false memory syndrome cases and stuff got implanted, because if they're responding this way, it must be sexual abuse, right? Because that's what we considered the type of person who responded.
And we're going to talk about false memory syndrome as part of the class.
Yeah, and so really, someone who had a neglectful parent, or someone who had a mentally ill parent, or someone who had attachment disruptions in their childhood would act and could react the same way as someone who had sexual abuse in their history.
Okay.
So it's really important to kind of understand that's where that whole concept of false memory really began.
And we'll talk about that at some length during the class. I want to make sure that the class understands how to ask certain kinds of questions and how not to ask questions, so as not to lead, somebody to develop memories that of something that perhaps never really existed. So
I just feel like I said, just.
So what would be considered a big T trauma?
So a big T trauma are some of the things we've recently have gone through in our country. So, there are tornadoes in Oklahoma. School shootings are big T traumas. A major car accident. Parents getting divorced. Those are,
and these are all different kinds of
the war,
of crises.
Soldiers,
and one of the things that we talk about in the class is that you never come out of a crisis in the same way that you go into a crisis. It will always change you.
Yeah, forever alters your perspective of yourself, the world, or others around you.
I think one of the things that would be interesting for the class to know is just what happens in the brain in terms of crisis, and we live in our lives pretty much of a cognitive, I call it in our right mind. We can think, we can talk, we can reason, but it seems as though people that have undergone traumas have at times they're triggered, and they just become very emotional. Can you talk just a little bit about what happens emotionally?
Yeah, I kind of use some examples for this to help clients understand it. So we store memories in our senses. That's how our brain works. And so when you have adrenaline pumping through your system, it's kind of like the glue that holds these sensory messages in your body system. So that's why we're more prone to remember things of high intensity, because of that attachment of adrenaline to our nervous system that's binding these memories into our
So it's
brain.
actually stored in part of the brain.
And so we get triggered with senses, with sensory memories. And so what happens is our body will repeat a pattern of wherever it is that memory began. And so I kind of explain to individuals, think about divers, deep sea divers. And there's this concept of the bends. And what'll happen is if they come through and up through the water too rapidly, nitrogen gets stored inside their blood system too rapidly and on their spinal column, and it's too high of too high of a level. And so what happens is they come out of the water and they have cognitive impairment, they have paralysis, they have all kinds of body systems that are physiologically not working. Well, what they need to do is go into a hyperbaric chamber, and that hyperbaric chamber re-assimilates the dive for them so that they actually come up properly. And by doing that, what's released out of their nervous system is the nitrogen, and the oxygen pushes that out, and so their bodies then return to a state of homeostasis, a state of balance.
And we talk about homeostasis in our class.
So what happens to an individual with a trauma memory is they're like a deep sea diver who came out of the experience too rapidly. And what got stuck inside their nervous system is all these stored messages. And these stored messages stay there for a reason, because I have to know that if I was in a car accident and it was a rainy day and it was midnight, my body would start to say, okay, being in the car at midnight is dangerous. Then it would say, being in the car in rain is dangerous. Okay, being in the car on this highway is dangerous. And so what it would start to do is it would start to store these memories and these senses. And that is a survival mechanism. It's there to keep us alive. It's there to perpetuate the species. It's there, it's God's design to protect us. And I think what I teach my clients often is the enemy uses it against us. He freezes us in those moments of trauma. So let's say a 5-year-old boy is molested. And his nervous system and his brain and his resources are limited. And so however that little boy processes that and manages that and deals with that is frozen inside his nervous system. So now fast forward him to 30. And he's trying to attach to his wife. Well, whenever a trigger anywhere near that...
like that same kind of experience?
Yes.
Anything that's even close to it?
Close to it. He goes back to being that 5-year-old little boy, dealing with whatever it is going on inside of him. And so that, because he never ascended properly, he never, his nervous system and his ability to manage stress and tolerate whatever is, that feeling. I do this a lot because it's the angst that they feel.
So these people find their way to therapy at some point, and you have developed, you've been trained, you're a specialist, I think, in an area of trauma therapy. What are some of the techniques or tools that you have found most useful in helping someone to reestablish that homeostatic balance?
Well, God has created our bodies to be in balance, to be in harmony, to be in rhythm. We were first created in the garden. We were to be in union with Him, in unity. And so when we were removed from the garden, because of the circumstances of that, we fell out of sync. And our bodies are constantly trying to return to that state of balance. And so by nature, we were created that way by God. And so we are created with a right, a left hemisphere, a right, a left body. We are created with a brain and a mind. You know, where does the Holy Spirit dwell? It doesn't dwell in the tabernacle anymore. It's not separate from us. It's in our body. If our brain and our body are disconnected, the Holy Spirit can't flow through us.
Wow.
If our body is, constipated, it can't move, it's tight, it's restrictive.
It really restricts the work of the Holy Spirit.
The Holy Spirit can't move.
Wow.
So I teach my clients about returning to the concept of flow, the original flow of the way God intended our bodies to be. Flow between the Spirit and Him, flow between the here and now and the response of our bodies. So I teach my clients a lot about mind, body, Holy Spirit connection, and I teach them how to tap into bilateral movement and body release. So there's a couple books.
Hold them up into the camera and then just read the
that
titles of them
are
for our students.
really great with this concept. She's not a Christian writer, but she's, Laura Parnell talks about tapping in. Now, as a Christian, we have to take out of this the concept that she teaches with bilateral movement. Doing something in the right hemisphere, right body side, activates left hemisphere. Something on the left side of the body activates right hemisphere. Any type of bilateral movement helps us get unstuck when we're triggered.
So you actually have clients actually do movement kinds of exercises.
I'm going to actually have you do something.
Oh, good Lord. My students will love that.
So the other one is Watchman Nee. I don't know if you've
sure.
read.
I've read a lot of Watchman Nee.
He's great about the breaking of the outer man and the release of the spirit.
Okay.
So he talks a lot about the outer man and the inner man. And so if you take that concept of flow again, the breaking through, the releasing, he uses the analogy of plugging into, we're the lamp, the Holy Spirit is the cord, and God is the electrical current. And a lamp is useless.
So there's things that we do, and there's things that only God can do, but we have to do our part.
That we have to do. And if we're not plugged into
Right.
the current, or we don't have our divine purpose, our potential. And he talks a great deal about the spirit. And so, again, integrating that.
Okay, go ahead.
Waking the Tiger is about healing trauma. This is a great deal about, he's a leading...
Who's the author of that book?
Peter Levine. He's a leading traumatologist, doctor, and he talks a great deal about, again, this concept of the body and how we don't release enough in our society, our body. And I think as Christians we're afraid sometimes to talk about our body as energy, to talk about our body that's similar to animals, because we share a common brain stem. We share a common...
it shares a common creator.
A common creator. And so therefore, we have higher reasoning, we have frontal lobe, we have, parts of our brain that they do not, but we have similar body systems.
Okay.
So by studying animals...
So there's ways that even animals are traumatized, and we can learn from what they're
Only animals in captivity are traumatized.
Seriously.
In the natural environment, they are not, because they know how to release.
Oh.
They know how to release.
And they do it at the right time.
They do it at the right time. And so when you teach someone how to release, and they can move forward. And so these are some great books.
I want to ask you about the next one, if that's okay. Because one of the techniques that has really become well-known, well-researched, and yet in many Christian circles, unfortunately, it's still kind of a controversial, mainly because of ignorance, is this technique called EMDR. And I'm not going to assume even that our students know what EMDR stands for and what that does and how that is related to trauma treatment. So maybe you could help us with a little bit with that.
EMDR was developed by Francine Shapiro over 20 years ago. It is, the original title of it is Eye Movement Desensitizing and Reprocessing. What she tapped into one day under a great deal of stress, she was a doctoral student, was she went outside and she was very stressed. She had just been diagnosed with cancer. All types of things were going on. And she got lost in watching the trees swaying. And by watching the trees swaying, she realized that her brain just naturally processed, and she was able to go from a maladaptive thought to an adaptive thought.
So again,
So-
the storage of some kind of a trauma or stress in one part of the brain, you use the other part of the brain to help bring that.
Yeah, it's
back
the
into
concept
balance.
is called adaptive information processing. Her
Okay.
theory is adaptive information processing.
Okay.
And her core theory began with EMDR, but since then there's been all types of branching. So I use a lot of adaptive information processing. I not only use EMDR, but I also use a lot of body therapy, a lot of sensory motor therapy, because they're linked together.
It gets the brain activated
The brain and
through
the
body
body.
movements.
The brain and the body in sync,
Wow.
in harmony, in rhythm, the way we were created to be.
And during that time, do people talk about their trauma at the same time and feel those feelings when they're actually moving their bodies around?
Yeah, and we don't have time to go into detail of what EMDR. In the beginning, EMDR it began by using eye movement, because they
Yes.
recognized that in REM sleep, right, your eyes move back and forth, and so there's a processing that goes on. There's taking information from short-term memory, adapting it, processing it, and putting into long-term memory. And for individuals with trauma, that gets stuck. Remember, they go back to being stuck. They come out of that experience without having the resources and the skills necessary. Not everybody who goes through a crisis is traumatized. If the resources are there, if the support system is there, your body will adapt and it will
And
release.
that's so much of what this class is about, is how to be there for people in the right way, in the right methods, with the right, kind of a person, right personality, to be with people during their time of crisis so that they can
Yeah.
work through it and get through the sequel of their life.
Yeah, and for crisis management, I always go back to Job, and I always say, two things, Maslow and Job, because Maslow, hierarchy of needs,
Yes.
you need to provide basic needs for them first.
That's right.
No processing, no deep talk, basic needs have to be
Just make that
glass
quick
of water, a
attachment.
blanket on your
Yes,
shoulders.
that's right.
The second thing that is Job, sitting with someone, when his friends began to talk,
That's when they got in trouble,
that's
didn't they?
when everything got a mess, and they tried to explain it. And I have so many clients who are wounded by people with good intentions who say things during times of crisis. And it's so wounding, because remember, that individual has a ton of adrenaline pumping through their system.
Many times you just need to be there with them, right?
Yes, and think about this. They're going to remember things at a heightened state
Yeah.
of what you say to them than what you would say to them in a non-critical state.
Right.
So it's better to say very little, and
Good
it's
point.
better to just be present. How are you
Touch
doing?
them.
What is it that I can do for you?
Right.
What
The-
is it
the
that you
basic
need?
and immediate needs.
Over philosophizing or Christianizing, and
Yeah.
God needed another angel, or when you say things like that, it freezes in their
Yeah.
nervous system, and they will replay that inside their head. God can only give you what you can handle.
Yeah. Yeah.
A traumatized person,
That kind of talk doesn't do much good.
it
In fact, it probably
actually,
is harmful.
it's
isn't it?
more harmful, because remember, it's freezing inside their nervous system.
Wow.
It's getting stuck, and that's why childhood wounds will block childhood joys. That's why so often it's the negative messages that really stick inside a person because of the way we store memories. And so part of EMDR and the bilateral processing releases, just like that hyperbaric, body chamber, releases these memories out of short-term memory. Your brain can process and adapt. Your right hemisphere, your left hemisphere, your frontal lobe, your body, they're all in sync together. They're processing information, and they're letting go of what the triggers are and all of that. They're storing it in long-term memory. So if you need it, you can access it, but it doesn't have the emotional connection that it used to have. The best example, and you've all read my husband's book, is whenever he would get triggered, he would shut down and he'd go hide in the bedroom. And he was a 7-year-old boy hiding. And, now when he gets stressed, he can be present, he can stay, he can remain. He doesn't revert back to that 7-year-old little boy who hides under the covers because he doesn't have resources, because he doesn't have skills. He still knows he's triggered.
And he's gone through a process of treatment that was involved with what we're talking about.
Yeah, he'd done a lot of body therapy. He did equine therapy, he did EMDR, he did,
And now he can talk about his experience without being overloaded. Victoria, there's a concept that that you have really helped me out on. It's the idea is someone that gets emotionally hijacked, emotionally overloaded, and that whole concept has meant a lot to me in my own therapy of working with clients, because I see people that you can see them getting emotionally overloaded, and they say and they do things when they're in a heightened emotional state that they wouldn't ordinarily do if they were in their rational mind. What happens when someone gets emotionally hijacked?
So I have two things that I'll do as we kind of close with this. I'll teach you what that's like. And then I want to go back because I think we missed this point with Dr. Dobbins, healing of the mind.
Yeah, which we will have talked about probably on day 2.
So remember what we were talking about is the Holy Spirit in this bilateral processing is able to flow into that individual's brain. A brain's an organ.
Yeah.
And their mind then is connected to this energy of the Holy Spirit, this power of the Holy Spirit. And the Holy Spirit gives them a new way to see their past, a new way to understand. And it's individual. It can't be imposed. That's where we make the mistake. We impose the belief system that they should have versus the Holy Spirit being allowed to reintegrate that. And I've watched clients find their own, true memory or truth, God's truth through that.
They can see, one of the things I teach the class is that we don't live according to the event of our past. We live according to the memory and the interpretation that we give to the event. And that triggers a strong emotional response. And that memory, or the way that we have looked at that or interpreted that event, can change. That can be edited.
That's it. And so, I was a little girl who was hospitalized. And I used to always, I had a lot of abandonment issues because of that. And when I went back and did EMDR around it, it was funny how I actually enjoyed being in the hospital. And I actually loved it. And there was all these things and memories about it that I couldn't access. And it was like, oh, I was okay. I was safe. God was there with me. My parents did what was right for me. And it was like, oh. And so it made this whole concept, God could help me to see something that I couldn't see before.
So the good that God promises to bring from really every event of our life if we're in flow with Him.
That's it. That's right.
Victoria, before we finish,
we didn't do
our
I know,
little
we're so bad.
exercise.
We're
I'm
like
trying
people
to do
who are
this
off topic.
to
I want
see
to make sure they're focused. It's not my strength.
But if you're looking at a class of people who are committed to Christ, you're looking at a class that people that are in all different professions and chaplains and counselors and social workers and pastors and so forth, and every one of them is going to deal with someone that's going through different kinds of crises. What's the one or two things that you would just want to say, if I could say this to make sure that you get this, what would you want to say to the class?
So let's do that. Let's conclude with me teaching you about your body and what is so important, because that's what I would want to teach people. I would want to teach people how to understand a trigger. And so if you think about it, a trigger is in the here and now. Something happens in the here and now. And what really should be, let's say, a level 3 or a level 4 becomes a level 10. and you can't think your way, and it's ruminating, and it's playing over and over inside your head, and it's picking up momentum, and you start, either shutting down and isolating, or you fight out, or you flee and run away, fight, flee, shut down. Because under stress, that's the only thing, that's it. When you're triggered, all of your right and left hemisphere are disengaged. If we put you under an MRI, your brain would be pretty dark, with the exception of your brain stem and a little bit of your right hemisphere.
Wow.
And it would be the alarm bell going off. And you could only make 3 decisions when you're triggered. You can only fight, you can only flee, or you can shut down. Wow. That is it. Great in life or death. Great in immediacy. Great when my car's spinning out of control, or the plane's going down, or not so good in a relationship. Not so good in a work situation. Not so good in daily life. Okay? So, how do we get you out of being triggered? So the reason why it's a level 10 is because it's collected all this history of times that you felt this way. And so it's now a level 10 because it's not just the here and now you're dealing with. You're dealing with every single time you felt that way or close to it. So it's kind of like veins, or it's kind of like systems, where if this is the core trigger in the here and now, you have all these systems that are branching off of it. And what happens is you're not dealing just with the here and now, you're dealing with everything. So imagine, that's why people's bodies freak out. So state changing is all about accessing what God has intended for our body. The animals do it.
So what's one way you can teach me to do this?
So state changing is all about recognizing we are fearfully and wonderfully made.
Okay.
I have these in my office.
I'm very nervous about this.
These are my little beanies, okay? And so anytime you cross midline, anytime you do something where your right and your left hemisphere are engaged, your brain starts to engage with it, okay?
Sure.
And so getting yourself comfortable with crossing midline.
So just doing something like this even?
Yeah. I teach people to tap here.
Okay.
I teach people to tap here.
Oh,
I tap my feet a lot. I rock my feet in bed a lot when I can't sleep.
That's one of the reasons why we do this jiggling and all
Well,
this kind
if you
of stuff
jiggle,
like
this
that.
is a nervous energy.
Yeah.
This is because I have so much energy stored in my body system. I want to fight. I want to flee.
But let's be intentional about it. So you
this
actually
is
teach
more
people
how
to do
to
some
manage.
bilateral movement.
To manage their body system. So I want you right now, you don't have to tell us what it is, but I want you right
Okay.
now to think of something on a scale from 0 to 10 that triggers you with a
Okay.
level 5.
Okay, I can think of it immediately.
Okay.
And I'll share it with the class when we're there.
So now I want you to sit back in your chair,
Okay.
and I want you to think about that.
Make sure it's still on camera.
I want you to think about that. Okay. And I want you to tell me what it feels like inside your body as you're tapping, moving. Where are you feeling that in your body?
Probably in my stomach, because instantly my stomach starts to move and rattle and roll a little bit. I mean, I can feel my stomach, tensing up a little bit.
So you get it in the gut.
Yeah, that's usually where I get
Okay.
it.
So now I want you to think about releasing that, because what's happening, if you stay with that, that will pick up momentum, and you'll start picking up history, and so you have to state change, which is, hello, what's the emotion that you're feeling? Tell me the
A little bit stress and fear.
fear. So hello, fearful body.
I can say that?
Yeah, hello, fearful
Oh,
body.
gosh. Hello, fearful body.
This is what my body feels like when it's stressed. Okay. What is it that my body needs? It needs a release in my gut.
It does need a release.
So I want you to think about opening that gut, that diaphragm, breathing deeply into that diaphragm, and breathing out. And not just that slow breath, because that's not going to do any good. You need energy in and a release. I want even more. You're still contained. You're still restricted. Yeah. One more good one. Now as it travels through your body, because you feel it in your arms and legs now. So now I want you to just kind of shake that out. I want you to release it because that's energy that has to come out.
And I can still do this.
Yeah. You can stop. You can do it. Now as you're recognizing that, tell me what your body's feeling. Is there any
Warmer. I feel warmer. Probably because I'm a little bit shy about doing something like this on camera. But and laughter, you know, but I mean I feel good.
So you
feel,
state changed.
Yeah,
So your
I
body's
feel
state
good.
changed. You stopped being trapped in that
Yeah,
state.
I did.
And so now I want you to do something which is the next step I teach people, which is to get present in the here and now. Because when you get trapped inside that fight, flee, shut down, that emotion that's going to cycle into other things, you need to get your brain in the here and now. It loses track of time and space. Okay? So find something in the room to focus on and just
Okay.
tell me about it.
I'm just going to focus on the microphone for just a moment.
And just tell me a few
It's
things about
round, it's white, it's got some kind of I can't see it, dimp or blimp or
it. Yeah, blue.
lines or blue. Okay, there it is.
So now I want you to ask yourself, where did your mind go? What were you thinking about when you were doing that?
I was trying to think about that. I was trying
Right. Did you think about anything else?
No, I was thinking just about
Oh,
that.
so your brain got a little focus. It got relaxed.
Mhm.
And how does it feel to have your brain just go,
That's interesting. I'm not thinking about what was stressing me.
yeah, you're not thinking about what was stressing you. You forgot it. And because your body got back in the here and now. You're
Yeah,
the
I
way
was way
God,
back a ways before.
the way God intended our body is to understand what it is we feel. Hello nervousness, hello fear, hello anxiety, hello angry body, you know, ooh, you know. What is it that I need to do to release it?
Mhm.
Build that awareness,
Mhm.
and then allowing ourselves to get grounded in the here and now. The
Okay.
Holy Spirit is here, it's now with you.
Right.
And so now the Holy Spirit can move through your body,
Mm.
teach you adaptive reasoning, help you understand things, speak more clearly to your wife.
And this has been really condensed here, but you would do this during a whole session with someone.
I would do
and
this.
just-
I would do this, and this is a very,
Did you do
very,
it more than
very
once?
mild form of EMDR.
Okay.
Very, very, very mild form of it.
Would you actually teach the person then so that
How to
when
do it
they,
in their
so
daily
that
life.
they do it in their daily life?
And it's great. I have clients who come back to me and they say, it was the weirdest thing. You know, I was so mad at my spouse, and I'm sitting in the car, and then I start tapping on the steering wheel, and I'm talking to myself, and next thing I know, I'm like, you know, okay, this isn't, you know, the end of the world. It's just jelly that spilled on the back of the car. It's not like my whole,
Huh.
you know, and
Life could be a whole lot worse.
and then, yeah, and then all of a sudden it was like, okay, I'm overreacting. Okay, I do need to make sure that there's order, and it's
Yeah.
okay for me to speak how I'm feeling,
Sure.
but I don't have to rage about it. I
Okay.
don't have to belittle my husband. I don't have
Mm-hmm.
to. And so just learning how to just bilateral.
So if one of the class members, or you know, I'm assuming that, you know, just we're going to be talking, you know, throughout the week about all different kinds of traumas, developmental, religious. We're going to talk about church traumas and crises and social crises. We're going to talk about you know, everything from developmental all the way through natural disasters and, you know, rape and PTSD and all those kinds of things all through the week. And here we are, and we're ready to wrap up this little interview. What else would you want to just make sure that the students know, so that you can say to them as we kind of wrap up?
That's a big, you know, I could probably speak about that for like 2 hours,
Yeah.
right? You know, what would I want to say? You know, probably the biggest thing is a professional who's working with individuals who are in crisis, who are in high levels of need. Know your body, know how they trigger you, where they take you. I state change, I bilateral all the time. I will get...
I mean, as a therapist,
As
you
a
have to be aware of it.
therapist, Michael, they will suck you in. And remember, if a person has regressed in front of you
Yeah.
into the age of 5, you're going to go on the ride with them if you're not body aware.
Okay.
You're not aware
So
of that.
stay aware of our own bodies.
Stay
as
aware of how
treating
you're
people.
responding as you're treating people.
Okay.
Stay aware of that. And refer them to professionals who know what they're, you know, the advanced types of training in trauma, You really do want to have a therapist who knows more about trauma than just talk therapy.
Yeah,
Because talk therapy it keeps that person stuck.
Okay.
And so there has to be a way to move through that. So knowing your community, knowing what therapists are out there, knowing your referral base, knowing that I think is really huge. You can get on Andrea's website. We're trying to get more Christian therapists trained in this area because we see the
It's
need for it.
developing really a really strong theological base for what you're doing.
And the integration of the healing of the mind and the body and the way God created us to be. We shouldn't be afraid to tap into these natural systems that our body has created.
Great.
That God has created.
The name
through our
of the
body.
person, one more time before we finish, that you would recommend for the students to read.
Gosh, there's so many. For what? For like EMDR?
Yeah, for EMDR and for trauma.
Well, Francine Shapiro is the one who
Okay.
began EMDR. And Robert Skayer and Peter Levine are two traumatologists.
Okay.
Now, they're not Christian, so you just have to
So you
integrate.
just integrate it through
You have to
your Christian
understand.
mind. That's
You have
right.
to
That's
integrate
right.
it through truth.
Well, most of the books that the students have read probably are not done by Christian authors. So they've had to learn how to do the good integration, and it's a hard work to do that. Well, I want to thank you very much for your time. It means a lot. This is very, very helpful. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. Well, God bless.
Thank you.
Okay.